Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back with another EU book review. And today we will be taking a look at the second graphic novel in our collection. We will be taking a look at Star Wars, Clone Wars, Volume 2, Victories and Sacrifices. So Victories and Sacrifices was collected and published in 2003, and it clocks in at about 115 pages. It only collects three comic issues in it. So there's two stories. One is a 2-issue story about the Battle of Naboo. And the other is a one-shot story about XII. So the Battle of Naboo, a little bit of background on that. After the Phantom Menace happened and the Gungans and the people of Naboo got together, the Gungans decided to migrate to one of the moons of Naboo. I don't know if all of them did, but a good chunk of the Gungans left the swamps and decided to colonize one of the moons, Dune. And so that's where they lived after the events of the Phantom Menace. During the Clone Wars, as this is starting, Boss Nass winds up contacting the Jedi Council and says, hey, I can't get a hold of the Gungans that live on the moon. Can you go check on them? So they do. And they get to the moon, Obi-Wan and Anakin and some ARC troopers and a few other of the Jedi. They get to the moon and they discover that all of the Gungans are dead. They've been wiped out by a biological weapon. Whole moon is a graveyard. And they find out that the moon was sort of a testing ground. The Separatists were testing a biological weapon on the moon to see about the potency of it. And then they were going to take that gas and load it up onto ships that they were then going to launch towards Naboo, hitting all and crashing them and hitting all of the population centers of the planet. So they were attempting to commit genocide on Naboo. And the two figures that were involved in this atrocity was a 100-year-old bounty hunter by the name of Durge. It's the first time we see this bounty hunter. And our friend from the first volume, Assaj Ventriss. Yep, she's back in Volume 2. And they were the ones that had sent the poison gas on the Gungans and were about to launch it to the planet of Naboo. Of course, Obi-Wan and Anakin and the troopers and the Jedi that went with them stopped them from doing that. They destroy their ships and their gas. And then Durge and Ventriss wind up fleeing. And then shortly after that event, Obi-Wan finds where the Separatists were making the gas. So he infiltrates the factory where they were making the gas with 4 other Jedi because he's looking for the antidote. And if he can find the antidote, it effectively makes it a non-weapon, because if they were ever to use it again on a populated area, they could just cure the people with the antidote. So the 5 of them go after the antidote, and Ventriss is there again. 4 of them don't make it. 4 of the Jedi. Obi-Wan's the only one who makes it back with the antidote. So 5 Jedi go in. 1 Jedi comes out. Ventriss winds up, and Durge winds up taking out his 4 Jedi companions. And he makes it back to the Republic, to the Jedi Council, and says, here's the antidote. But what price did he have to pay to get the antidote? The Gungans in the battle, and then the Jedi. So it was an atrocious battle, trying to prevent them from genociding on Naboo and getting the antidote. That was the first sort of story. The XII story was she goes to a planet called Brental 4 because they are planning on joining the Separatists. There's a dictator involved. And they go and it's a prison planet, and they decide they're going to join Dooku, and it's XII and some Jedi go there to try to prevent that. And they wind up doing that, but she finds out that the majority of the planet wanted to join the Separatists. They were so disgusted with the Republic and the corruption that was going on, they wanted to join the Separatists, and the Republic didn't want them to do that. So she winds up getting involved. She winds up taking down their machinery and their weapons. And she winds up toppling the dictator and then putting in a government that's sympathetic to the Republic so that they'll stay. And of course, at the end of it, the last page or two, when she's talking with Plo Koon afterwards, she's wrestling with this idea of, did we do the right thing? The majority of the planet wanted to join the Separatists. It was sort of like a democracy, but we went in and we said, no, that's not going to happen. And they installed the government that's sympathetic to the Republic. We basically gave them a government against their will. And are we not any better? Maybe we're not any better than the Separatists, right? Maybe we're just as bad as they are. So she was wrestling with this idea that we didn't give them their freedom. We just sort of yoked them back to the Republic against their will. And is that right? And does that make us just as bad as the Separatists? So a lot of moral and ethical quandaries going on in the Clone Wars. And we're only 2 graphic novels in. So what did we like about it? There was a lot to like about this particular comic novel, this particular graphic novel. One of the things that I liked about it was you're beginning to see the humanization of the clone troopers. So when they're on the Battle of Naboo, Anakin and one of the ARC troopers goes off on their own to go do part of their mission. And as they're leaving, Anakin tells him, what is your name? What do I call you? And the clone trooper says, we don't have names. None of the clones have names. We don't have names. We're mass produced. He says, well, I can't just call you the clone. What is your designation? And he says, my designation is A17. That's his batch number. And he says, well, I can't call you that either. That makes you sound like a droid. So what does A stand for? And he says, that stands for Alpha. So Anakin says, that's what I'm going to call you. I'm going to call you Alpha. And that's what he calls it for the rest of the story. So now we are beginning to see the differentiation of the clone troopers, and we're beginning to see how the Jedi are starting to interact with them on a different level, right? Before, they were just mass-produced foot soldiers, cogs in the machine, and if you needed more clone troopers to throw at your war machines, you just grew more. But now we're beginning to see that these clone troopers, they're different, right? They're starting to get names. They have different personalities. They have different backstories. They have different memories, different things that make them who they are. They're starting to become people, as opposed to just cogs in a machine, as opposed to just factory-grown foot soldiers. And that brings a whole new wrinkle to the Clone Wars, right? Now that the Jedi are starting to interact with them as equals, as people, makes it a little harder for them to lead them into... Remember, they didn't want to be generals in the first place. They didn't want to lead battles. They didn't want to lead troops. They really didn't want to lead troops that they considered equals and people. But here we are. And now we're starting to see that you're going to start seeing more and more of this as the Clone Wars go on. They're starting to grow closer to their clone commanders. They're starting to interact with them as equals. And that's going to make the betrayal of Order 66 so much more poignant when we get to that. So I like that we're starting to see that. We're starting to see, I like a lot of what we see with Assaj Ventriss. She's a very powerful Sith. She's extremely powerful. She's like a Sith witch. And she's got extremely powerful dark side magic. She has necromancy. She can raise the dead. In fact, she did that when she was fighting Obi-Wan. She raised the corpses of the Gungan warriors that had been killed by the gas. And they fought for her. So she raised her own corpse army And when that happened, Obi-Wan said, well, that's an abomination. You're so steeped in the dark side. That is just an abomination. And she said to Obi-Wan, she said, you don't understand. There is no dark side. You don't understand the Force. There's no dark side. There's no light side. There's just the Force. And so this is the first time, chronologically speaking, that we begin to see that attitude. That people begin to challenge the binary nature of the Force. You'll see that a lot. We're going to get into that a lot further down the road, especially during the New Jedi Order series. But this is the first time that people begin to question the binary nature. There is no light side. There is no dark side. There's just the Force. And it is how you use the Force that determines whether you're good or evil. Your actions, how you use it, are good or evil. It's not the Force. Force is just a tool. It's just a thing you tap into. It's how you use it that determines whether you're good or bad. And so we'll see that a lot further down the road. A lot of other people will begin to adopt that idea that it's not just black and white. It's not just yes or no, off or on. Light side, dark side. There's nuance to the Force, and there's other things that determine whether you're good or evil, light or dark. And we begin to see that, and I like that. I like that we see that attitude. Durge was interesting. He's like 100-year-old. He's a 100-year-old bounty hunter, apparently. This is the first time you see this character. He's basically Jango Fett on steroids. I mean, he's armed to the teeth. He's got wings. He can fly. He's got so much armor and weaponry on him. He's mostly cyborg, I think. I don't think there's any fleshy bits in there. At one point during one of the battles, one of the Jedis tried to sever his spine with a lightsaber. And when he just kept moving, kept going, he said, how can you still be walking? He's like, well, I don't have a spine. I don't have a spine to sever. It's all mechanical. So I don't know how much of him is... He could be completely robot, or he could just be like Anakin was when he became Vader, just a little bit of fleshy bits, but mostly robot. He's more machine now than man, twisted and evil. So he was a little bit overpowered. I mean, he took on multiple Jedi by himself. He killed multiple Jedi by himself. He seemed to be a little bit overpowered from my end of it. Just a way to sort of kill off the Jedi that the not the named Jedi, but the extra Jedi. Just a way to make him sort of badass, but he was. I mean, and what's interesting was to see how willing Palpatine was to get his power, right? He's willing to do a lot to get his power and to consolidate his power. And he's willing to put his home planet in the crosshairs, not once, but twice. And the second time was horrific. I mean, he was willing to commit genocide. And this is just the first of many genocidal acts that Palpatine, and later on Darth Vader, are going to commit in their service to the Empire. Now, this isn't the first bit of genocide this is the first bit of genocide that we see, but it's certainly not the last bit of genocide we're going to see. There's a lot of it. There's a lot that they do. It's very atrocious, and I like that they have given us what they call the new face of war, right? It's not just space battles and lightsaber battles and Jedi fighting Sith and all that, but it's gritty, it's violent, it's dirty, it's atrocious. We're seeing mass death, we're seeing mass atrocities, and the Jedi have to wrestle with these things. They have to lead these troops into battle, and they have to wrestle with the aftermath of all of that. And I like that we get to see that. You weren't able to see these sort of atrocities on the TV show and on the cartoons, but you can in the comic books and you can in the novels. And so I'm glad that we're getting to see that side of things, because people have to remember that the Clone Wars, they weren't just an abstract thing. They were violent, and there was a lot going on. There was a lot of death on both sides. It was a galaxy-wide atrocity, and we're now beginning to see how much Palpatine is willing to put in the crosshairs to gather to make his grand plan, to gather his empire and to keep his power. And it's atrocious. And I also like, again, we saw Shakti wrestling with the same moral and ethical quandaries that they were wrestling with in Volume 1. Are we doing the right thing? Are we no better than somebody else? How can we serve? I keep hearing that phrase over and over again as I read these things. How can we serve something that is corrupt without becoming corrupt ourselves? And the Jedi are going to wrestle with that for the next 3.5 years as they are put into positions that they never expected to be put in, they're not trained to be put in, they're not good at, and yet there they are, and they're not the keepers of peace anymore, they're not the upholders of life anymore, they are harbingers of death. That's what they're going to become, and it's going to wear on them very, very heavily. So I like that we're wrestling with all of those questions and moral and ethical dilemmas. So this was a good book. Another solid 4 for me. The artwork was just the same as the first. So if you liked the art in the first graphic novel, you're going to like the art in this graphic novel. It's a pretty solid compilation. And again, like the first one, is if you've come across it, it's worth your time to pick it up and put it in your collection, and it's worth your time to read. I think it brings up a lot of good things, and we get to see a lot of nuance and a lot of different questions about the Clone Wars. So guys, there is my review of Star Wars Clone Wars Volume 2, Victories and Sacrifices. The next novel we're going to read is the first Republic Commando novel, and that's going to be Star Wars Republic Commando Hard Contact. Yep, Hard Contact. So that'll be the first Republic Commando book we read. We're back to books now. We've sort of made it out of the graphic novels that I have, and we're back to the mainline novels. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. You get 2 videos from me this week because I wanted to just sort of get over the hump, read and review, and get over the hump of the graphic novels and get back into the books. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you've read these graphic novels and you like them or you don't like them, let me know what you think. Put the comments down below. Tell me why you liked them. Tell me why you didn't like them. Tell me what you thought about them. Tell me what you think about the Clone Wars so far and where you stand on some of these moral and ethical decisions. And as always, give it a like and a thumbs up. Give it a subscribe. Share it around. Tell your friends. Tell your enemies. Tell people that want to know more about the Clone Wars, because we're getting right into the thick of things now. And as always, I will see you in the next video.